Hi, I'm Kevin. Welcome to my little music corner. I want to tell you about 7 albums from the 70s that are, maybe they're lost, maybe they're underrated, maybe they're even forgotten. Some of it's weird, all of it's great, and I think if you don't already have these in your collection, you're probably going to want to have a copy of at least one of these. So here we go. I was born in the mid-70s, so I don't actually remember any of these albums we're talking about when they were released. But I love discovering music, new and old. And I actually heard about each of the ones I'm going to talk about just in the last 5 years or so. In fact, the first one just in the last couple of months. So the first one here is Stevie Wonder's Journey Through the Secret Life of Plants. Okay, so after Stevie's amazing Songs in the Key of Life album, this was the follow-up. So he did the soundtrack to a documentary about plants, and it's a double album. Okay, so you can imagine the anticipation of 4 years in between the previous album and this one, but it was a commercial disappointment. Okay, so I mean, it's a little unusual in that Stevie's voice doesn't even come in until I think 15 minutes into the album, and so it was a little surprising. You can see, so it opens with Earth's Creation, which is this instrumental piece. There's to me, there's a clear Vangelis influence, and in the 70s, late 70s, if you're going to do a keyboard-based soundtrack to a nature documentary, Vangelis is going to be an influence, I would assume. So this was a digitally pioneering album. It was one of the first fully digital recordings, and he also used this synthesizer. It was the Yamaha GX1 that Stevie nicknamed the Dream Machine. I feel kind of weird even referring to him by first name. We're not on a first name basis. Mr. Wonder nicknamed it the Dream Machine. He was, from then forward, and probably before that, was a big fan of using technology, and in the 80s actually worked with Ray Kurzweil, who created some synthesizers for him before he became this tech visionary. So anyway, back to the Vangelis influence. I think this is interesting because that sounds like a weird connection, but it was just a couple years later that Stevie actually participated in the All-Star Choir for Donna Summer's cover of Vangelis and John Anderson's State of Independence. And that Quincy Jones-led session was actually practically a prototype for We Are the World that came a couple years after that, which also, of course, included Mr. Wonder. Okay, so speaking of Vangelis, since you brought up Vangelis, let's talk about his first solo album. So his band Aphrodite's Child had just broken up. Their last album, also a double album, was a cornerstone of the progressive rock movement, but he wanted to create his own sound. And so there are vocal songs on this, there are instrumental songs. He hadn't quite found his footing as what he was known for later on. Robert Fatoussi did the vocals on the album. He was later known as F.R. David and had an 80s hit with Words Don't Come Easy. So Vangelis, at one point, auditioned to replace Rick Wakeman in Yes, and that didn't work out. And I think that would have been fantastic, but it was not to be. He went on to create other great albums like this, and with John Anderson, as I mentioned. And then here's where State of Independence comes in. But since you brought up Rick Wakeman, let's talk about Rick Wakeman for a minute. Here's Journey to the Center of the Earth. Now, you might be saying that one's not lost, forgotten, or underrated. Everybody knows that album. Aha. But originally, this was a live album, and it was a single album. And, maybe that wasn't what it should have been. So when they wrote this album, there was a full score that was quite a bit longer than the single album could contain. And if only they'd done a double album, well, the score was lost and they couldn't. But decades later, it actually showed up in a box on Rick Wakeman's doorstep. And a couple years after that, this came along, which is a re-recording in 2012, and it adds 18 minutes more than the length of the original. So it's not quite double album, but it's about an hour of music. And honestly, it may be controversial, I love this better than the original version because the quality level is much better. But he keeps those analog synth sounds in there. And actually, even one of the original vocalists, Ashley Holt, returns for this project. And this, by the way, is an alternate cover that was from Classic Rock Magazine. The standard version has a Roger Dean painted cover. I just love the feel of this. I mean, it really plays up on the whole Jules Verne thing there. Love it. You can maybe see a common thread here where things with the word earth come in. Here's a great album from the 70s called Songs of the Marching Children by Earth and Fire. Not Earth, Wind and Fire, Earth and Fire. This is a recent re-release, remaster with bonus tracks from 1971. Now this is a Dutch band started by the Koorts brothers, and they have a female vocalist named Jenny Cogman. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. But it's a, early example of progressive rock. But I adore this album. Honestly, it's, to me, a must-have. The highlights include the title track, which is this sidelong multi-part epic, and Storm and Thunder, which I think is actually the strongest of the tracks. But this version actually has bonus tracks on it, which is kind of an odd thing to do for an album with a sidelong piece to shove in bonus tracks. I actually put them on side one, which I think is an unusual choice. But even the bonus tracks are fantastic. If you're into early prog rock, if you're into Jefferson Airplane, you probably would love that. So speaking of concept albums with the world in them, let's talk about War of the Worlds. Now, this is certainly not forgotten, but I think definitely underrated. Okay, so it's Jeff Wayne is the guy behind this, and I didn't actually know much about Jeff Wayne until I heard this album. Again, pretty recently, in the last 6 months or so. It's the first time I ever heard this album, and if you know and grew up with this album, you're probably shocked by that. Remember, I was a toddler when this came out. So Jeff Wayne is the visionary behind this album, but he got Richard Burton to do the narration. Just power behind his voice. Justin Hayward from the Moody Blues sings on a few tracks. David Essex, who at the time was famous for originating the song "Rock On," which 80s kids like myself probably remember the Michael Damian version. That was not the original. It's a sci-fi concept album with definite prog rock roots. And so when I heard that, I thought, this is for me for sure. It's also a little disco, a little musical theater. So if that's not your thing, that might be a turnoff. But it's an epic double album. And he kept doing that kind of thing. Later on, a few years later, he did an album based on the story of Spartacus. I actually want to talk about a different Spartacus album. So let's talk about Triumvirat. I'm probably saying that wrong. Internet, do your thing and let me know if I'm wrong, because you're good at that. Triumvirat, Spartacus. So it may be Triumvirat, because they have this recurring mouse that shows up on their album covers. But I think it's a mouse, not a rat. You guys will let me know if I'm wrong about that one too. But this is a concept album. I think side 2 is the best. These guys were a German 3-piece band. They were often compared to Emerson, Lake and Palmer as a 3-piece progressive rock mid-70s band would tend to be, but they are kind of similar. I find that they're a little more accessible than ELP myself. So speaking of weird bands, let's talk about Godley and Creme. So you may be familiar that these guys were a spinoff of 10cc. They actually broke up. 10cc kept going on without them. We could talk about 10cc all day, but Kevin Godley and Lowell Creme split off and created this duo, Godley and Creme. But they had invented this new musical device called the Gizmotron, later called the Gizmo, that attached to an electric guitar and would create bowing effects, and would physically bow the strings, and it could sound like all kinds of instruments when combined with other effects pedals and whatnot. So to demonstrate that, they wanted to create an album. And so they created Consequences. And it kept growing and growing and growing, and it became this 3-album epic. And it's got this Monty Python-esque comedy skit going on. It's got a whole story. It's the book details some of the story that comes with the album, but it's in 3 parts. They released a single LP version, Music from Consequences, a couple years later. 5 o'clock in the morning is one of the songs that's a highlight. For me, When Things Go Wrong, Cool, Cool, Cool are also great highlights. And those songs alone are worth owning the whole thing in my book. But it's really interesting to hear the whole thing and how it fits together. So they created several other albums. And a lot of the music videos from the 80s, these guys actually directed, and they went on to have a little bit of pop success themselves with this mid-80s album that featured the song Cry, and Trevor Horn produced that. But Consequences hasn't entirely faded into obscurity. In fact, a podcast was launched in 2018 and ran for 99 episodes talking about that album and lots of topics around it. So are any of these albums really forgotten? I hope not. I think most of them, all of them are underrated. I think they should be talked about more. And so I'm talking about them. But if you already have all of these in your collection, well, feel free to comment and, just pat yourself on the back if you have to. But also let me know what you love about them. Let me know what else I've missed. If I love this, I would love this other thing. Maybe I won't. Maybe I will. I would love to hear about things I've never heard of. Like the Stevie Wonder album I was talking about. I saw this randomly thumbing through a used record store like a month ago, and I had never heard of it, and I thought, I'm going to give this a shot. So let me know what I'm missing. Thanks for watching. Check the description for links to albums and playlists. And if you want to see more of this kind of stuff, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for listening.